What is up, my dice rolling legion? I'm a person who likes to assign character traits to sheets of paper with math on them, and today I'm gonna be working on a lovely illustration featuring a couple such collections of numbers from my current D&D 5e campaign, all while regaling you with the story about that time the Goblin became a phylactery. This is part 2 to my previous D&D story time, the tale of how the barbarian joined the tiefling Yakuza, link in description, and was originally meant to be just one single part, but things started running even longer than the previous installment, like a lot longer, so I did end up having to split today's tale into 2 parts. Apologies for that. I do, of course, recommend going and watching how the barbarian joined the tiefling Yakuza first, but if you are one of them loose cannons who doesn't play by the rules and needs to turn in your gun and your badge, be prepared for some confusion. This is still an evil campaign, by the by. Just keep that in mind as we go. This one gets a bit dark. Anyway, our story begins once again in the swampy southernmost region of the kingdom of Ifalna. This time in a ruined, turned dark temple by an ancient demon-worshipping cult deep in the heart of the bayou. Our party, sirs not appearing in the previous story, include Keveshtar, the undead wizard, and Briark, the goblin sorcerer. Gooderup, the tiefling barbarian, Wildfire, the wood elf cleric, Nub, the turtle fighter, and Morjana, the tiefling monk also feature in this tale. For real, go watch part 1 if you haven't already. But for the most part, this little ditty focuses mainly on Keveshtar and Briark, who now find themselves as prisoners within this ruin-turned temple. Why? Or more importantly, how are the magic users who could presumably waggle their fingers until their current predicament stopped existing even end up here, you might be wondering? Well, Keveshtar doesn't have a body right now for starters, and Briark is recovering from some, involuntary open heart surgery. This raises further questions, I'm sensing. Actually, let me back this up just a wee bit. Way back at the beginning of the campaign, in the innocent, less incriminating level 1 days, this cult had hired a mercenary, our dearest Deutera, and an eco-terrorist, our precious bean Wildfire, to do some relic recovery for them. Nub just kind of followed the 2 of them into the temple, and everyone just kind of assumed he was with one or the other of them. He wasn't. Nub's kind of a free agent like that. Briark was actually born into this cult. They, keep a bunch of goblins around as, let's say unpaid servants for life, but since he had the good fortune of being born with access to a pool of 1,000,000 mana thanks to some magical nepotism, Briark does hold about the same status as a new initiate to the cult would, which isn't a lot, but still pretty prestigious for a goblin. And then there's Keveshtar, who was very much blackmailed into all of this. See, while out scouring the land for these relics that will resurrect the godlord terrible demon thing this cult worships, some of the cultists found a very powerful magic item that is very near and dear to Keveshtar, who had the misfortune of being on the opposite side of the kingdom, working on reading her way through its largest library, when the cultists in question broke into her home, crippled her homunculus butler, and stole this magic item. Long and short, the leader of this cult, a gray-skinned tiefling named Sanuhem, knew exactly what this item of Keveshtar's was. I'm building up to a big reveal here, just roll with it. And recognizing the golden opportunity that has quite literally been handed to him, refuses to return said item unless she helps with the questionable archaeology. And so, she did. After about 5 or 6 levels worth of adventure in peril that included raiding a tomb, killing some frogmen, melting a dude's face, terrorizing a town, pickling a gnome, impersonating a town guard, and fighting a vampire over another magic item that wasn't what they were looking for, the party returns to the temple, where the cultists appear to have done some redecorating, with the addition of a big hole blasted in the wall, and a handful of goblin corpses strewn about the grounds. It turns out, while the party was out having happy murder hobo fun time adventures, some of the goblins here had broken into Saduham's private stash of magical shenanigans and had themselves a little uprising. While many of the rebellious goblins were slain and the items they had stolen recovered, a few did manage to escape via the big hole they blasted in the wall. And, of course, one of the items that they had escaped with was Keveshtar's prized magic item. After quite literally shooting the messenger with a ray of frost, Keveshtar marched herself down to the temple archive and began poring through every single book about the region they had, all in an effort to deduce where the goblins could have possibly gone. She eventually figures it out after several hours of research and heads out immediately. Her undead affliction renders her completely immune to pesky little things like exhaustion, meaning that she physically does not require sleep. The other 4, however, being exhaustion-prone meatbags, do stay and sleep for the night and catch up the next day in a series of rather hilarious events that involve Briark transforming Wildfire into a horse, or as his player calls it, the best hour of Wildfire's life, and Uteroth failing many handle animal checks and ultimately flying into a tree stump along with Briark when Wildfire inevitably turns back into an elf once the spell's duration was up, where they are then relentlessly mocked by an old swarthy dwarven man who turns out to be Keveshtar in magical disguise. It was a very interesting session, to say the least. Anyway, after stealing some horses as Wildfire set part of a town on fire, this is just how Wildfire do. The party tracks down the goblins, most of whom are already dead, because of course they are, into the subterranean labyrinth. Here they have to fight their way through a little bit of everything, ranging from rodents of unusual size to carrion crawlers to minotaurs. No labyrinth is complete without them. But at the lowest level of it all, Keveshtar finally gets her magic item back, which turns out to be a wooden soup spoon. This party has a strange fetish for eating utensils, I know. Funnily enough, this is also the same place where Wildfire found his first spork. See, Briark had attempted to track down Keveshtar's soup spoon using locate object, but since all he knew about it was that it was a carved wooden spoon, rather than leading them straight to what they were actually looking for, the spell instead directed the party to a barrel full of cutlery, one item of which happened to be the spork that would become Wildfire's holy weapon. But Keveshtar gets one heck of a power boost from her soup spoon, at which point the last surviving goblin, who had said spoon, uses one of the stolen demon relic things to turn himself into a monster. We'll get back to that. But after a long, arduous fight, the party manages to take him down. However, before the 5 of them even have a chance to loot the body, a portal opens up right behind them. Our old pal Saduhem steps through the void and proceeds to betray the Physidiac out of our non-heroes. He casts Mass Hold Person on Udorok, Wildfire, Nub, and Keveshtar, and takes Briark, who went willingly while holding Keveshtar's soup spoon, back through the portal with him, leaving them all to die at the bottom of this labyrinth with a couple of his cultists, spell slots, potions, and abilities mostly depleted and HP running low all around. Keveshtar managed to break out of the hold person, breaking damn near every bone in her body in the process, and goes kind of berserk. She transforms into this betentacled monstrosity and manages to kill one of the cultists so hard that it ripped open the fabric of time and space, creating a fresh portal back to the cult temple. This is just one of the many freaky deaky Keveshtar things that tend to happen from time to time. Just roll with it for now. Wildfire, for his part, is quite horrified by what he's just witnessed, and once the hold person has been dispelled, he looks to Udorok and asks if they should go after her. Udorok, without taking his eyes off of the slowly closing portal, simply says, "I want that," and runs through. We're still not quite sure what he meant by this, but Wildfire, having no desire to be trapped down here alone with not but a few cantrips, a single health potion, and Melora only knows what kinds of monsters, follows after the barbarian. What they witnessed after they got back to the temple, however, can best be described as a bloody bloodbath, with lots of screaming and both cultists and goblins alike going insane just from laying eyes on the eldritch nightmare creature that had once been Keveshtar. Yeah, it was a fun, disturbing time. Amid the cacophony of screams, Saduhem leads Briark to his study, where he proceeds to stab the goblin in the chest, slicing him open and exposing his heart. Here is where Sadu reveals that Keveshtar isn't just some high-functioning ghoul or hyper-intelligent zombie or even a revenant, and she most certainly isn't a vampire. She's a lich, and this wooden soup spoon that Saduhem is now embedding directly into Briark's heart is her phylactery. Briark passes out from the pain, and as Sadu is using his magic to heal Briark back up, the monstrous Keveshtar freezes in place and begins to crumble, leaving nothing but a pile of ash, the equipment she had on her, and her skull. This is where the party actually split. Udorok, Wildfire, and Nub ran to Umbasa and were punching out organized crime bosses and knife fighting with waifus, all while Briark and Keveshtar mostly slept. They've been through a lot, okay? Anyway, back to the part where we're deep in the bayou at the ruin-turned-cult temple. Briark wakes up after having slept for the better part of a week, clutching at his entirely healed chest in a panic. He'd spent a lot of this time having very bizarre dreams of ancient desert kingdoms, a city populated entirely by the dead, and being cut open and having a spoon shoved inside of him, and strange voices calling out to him. Everything in the waking world seemed normal, though. Well, as normal as anything really can be when you're part of a demon-worshipping cult. There didn't appear to be any trace of a wound on his chest, and he wasn't even in pain, but everything still felt off. And he could swear that despite being completely alone in this room, there was someone else in there with him. About as quick as Briark was up and about, he was taken to Saduham's office, where any hope he'd had that the whole soup spoon thing was all just a bad dream was immediately shattered. Sitting right on Sadhu's desk was an old yet ominous tome that Briark recognized instantly as Keveshtar's spellbook. And sitting on one of the bookshelves behind Saduhem was her prized hat of disguise and her own skull. So, quick mechanical note here. Normally, when a lich's body is destroyed, it regenerates after a time wherever their phylactery is. However, for the sake of not having a player sitting at the table with nothing to do, for this very homebrewed playable version, when Keveshtar hits 0 hit points, she does not get to go down to -10. Her body just kind of turns to dust, leaving behind whatever clothing and items were on her person, and she reverts to a demi-lich form. I'm not going to go super in-depth on what a demi-lich is. It's all on pages 48 and 49 of the 5e Monster Manual if you desire to know more. But basically, she turns into a talking skull. Her weird face tattoo is still present for backstory reasons that are completely unrelated to this tale, and her eye sockets glow blue, but she is functionally just a talking skull. She has Mage Hand and a couple once-per-day abilities, but no movement speed and barely any ability scores to speak of, and cannot really function under her own power in this state. Normally, demi-liches get to fly, but this playable version does not. Anyway, I bring this up because in fighting that vampire I briefly mentioned earlier, Keveshtar did hit 0 HP and did indeed skullify, and Briark was the one who had to carry her around for the 10 days it took for her body to regenerate that time. So he knows exactly what her skull form looks like and is pretty horrified to see that the eye sockets are not glowing, nor is she talking or doing anything at all, really. Saduhem inquires as to how Briark is holding up, fine by the way, explains his side of how everything went down that night with the stabbing and the spooning, and how this has all been in an effort to try and control Keveshtar. A subjugated lich being directed by a loyal servant to the cult could be an immensely powerful weapon after all. Briark is granted time off from his regular duties as he comes to grips with his new role and even given free roam of all of the non-restricted areas of the temple. He's obviously not allowed to leave or even go outside under any circumstances unsupervised, but Briark thanks his master as he heard what almost sounded like Keveshtar's voice, scoffing at all of this. But sure enough, the skull was still dark. After leaving Sadhu's office, Briark makes his way to the lower levels where the goblins are housed in search of his mentor, a senile old goblin named Pickles, whom he finds in the midst of making breakfast, following a recipe from a book about poison brewing. Pickles' eyesight isn't exactly what it used to be, and very few of these goblins are ever taught how to read, so it's not like anyone was really able to correct the old man until Briark came along. Is it any wonder that goblins don't typically live to old age? In any case, Briark confides in his mentor about all the weird things that have happened to him as of late while helping him cook actual, what goblins consider food. And that's when he starts hearing Keveshtar actively chiming in on the conversation. Alarmed, Briark starts frantically looking around the room, trying desperately to find the half-drow presenting lich, but all he sees are goblins and rats. More disturbing yet, Pickles doesn't hear her. Granted, the old goblin's hearing isn't all that great, nor is his brain firing on all cylinders these days, that he is confident that Briark is indeed the only person he's been conversing with just now. Briark excuses himself from the conversation and runs back up the stairs. All the while, he can still hear Kaveshtar talking to him, but he doesn't stop running until he's made it back to the privacy of the room he woke up in. Nor does he make any attempt to actually speak to her until he's closed and locked the door behind him. "Where are you?" he asked in a panic as he frantically looks under the bed and starts flinging open every drawer and chest in the room. After he's finished tearing the room apart, one of his arms begins to move of its own accord, the hand turning over in front of his face as the fingers wiggle. "It would seem I am inside of you," Kaveshtar responded. "Yeah, the whole turning into a tentacle monster straight out of some weird hentai and having the thing what houses her soul shoved right into the beating heart of a living being was pretty traumatic, to say the least. Not just physically and mentally, but also spiritually, metaphysically. I don't know. Basically, rather than waking up as a demi-lich like she normally would in this sort of situation, Kaveshtar's consciousness went back to the phylactery. So yeah, she kind of is inside Briark's body right now in a weird sort of way. The two spend some time wrestling each other for control over Briark's body. Briark hits himself in the face a couple of times in a vain attempt to try and get her out of his head. Kaveshtar, who is still super salty about him running off with her soup spoon in the first place, tries to scare him by thinking of some super horrific things within their shared headspace, but eventually the two reach a stalemate and actually start trying to talk things out. Kaveshtar mocks Briark's resolve in collecting all of the relics that will resurrect this ancient demon lord. Because those 19s she's rocking for both wisdom and intelligence, about the only ability scores she has in her current state, coupled with being a centuries-old abomination sustained by pure evil herself, afford her the foresight to know exactly how this endeavor is going to end. You know, that plot twist we all see coming from miles away, where the freshly resurrected demon lord kills all of the cultists what brought him back to life so that he can feast on their souls or blood or flesh or whatever and grow more powerful before moving on to destroy literally everything else. Displaying wisdom almost unheard of for a goblin, Briark, however, is actually counting on exactly this turn of events happening. He reveals to Kaveshtar that the cult has been searching for these relics for decades now, and that in his youth, Pickles had actually been the one to find most of what the cult currently possesses. Pickles had been a sorcerer, just like Briark, and while in the prime of his life, Pickles had been working to execute a rather ingenious plan. Collect all of the relics, and let the cult resurrect their godlord terrible demon whatsits, entirely because it will most likely kill them all. In the chaos, all of the goblins can make their escape and finally have their freedom. While largely seeking to continue Pickle's work and hoping to complete this task before his mentor dies of old age, which is about 60 years old for goblins, Briark also notes that once free, the goblins will need a leader, a role that he is planning to slot himself neatly into. Yes, Briark's entire motivation is to become a goblin king. If you need to take a moment to go listen to Dance Magic Dance, I totally understand. Anyway, Kaveshtar and Briark reached something vaguely resembling an understanding and began plotting their escape. After a couple of days and with some magical help from Saduham, of all people, Keveshtar does eventually manage to get into her skull, giving her some semblance of independence. You know, aside from the whole not being able to move thing, which is not great, considering old Sadu decides that he doesn't want to let her out of his sight, meaning that she is effectively imprisoned on a high shelf. However, this is where we start to see some of the weird effects that Keveshtar's phylactery being inside of Briark is actually having on the both of them. One of which being that they can now talk to each other telepathically regardless of how far away they actually are from each other. They are the only people either one can communicate with in this way, at least until Keveshtar eventually learns telepathy around level 11, but this ability does turn out to be instrumental to their escape plans. Basically, the plan is for Briark to just carry on as normal. Just doing his regular thing and doing as he's told until Keveshtar is finally able to regenerate her own body. At which point, she should be able to use her freaky-deaky tentacle magic to GT them the FO. Many of her regular spells, abilities, and magic either manifest as or involve tentacles. Alas, the hour grows late, so we are going to leave off right here for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you are enjoying this story and would like to hear the thrilling conclusion of this particular evil campaign tale in part 3 of Turtles and Bagpipes, subscribe so you don't miss it. And that's all I've got for you. Later.